Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to Scramble Drill. I'm Josh Johnson. Over there, sitting pretty, looking nice through the power of the internet, we got Ben Watts in his scrubs, his bright blue scrubs.
Listen, I come from work and then do this.
We're blue collar folks, man.
Yeah. Full-time jobs. This is a hobby. Let's be honest. This is a hobby. We are, love to do this full time. But you guys are not putting up the financial profits up front to help us get there. This is all your fault. That I have to work. It's not even a 9 to 5. I work past that. I work more than 9 to 8 hours a day.
It's good vibes only, though, over here, because we get to talk about fantasy football.
I'm not salty at all.
Not a little bit, Ben. We're stoked to be here with you. We're talking about some wide receivers on this episode, doing a little bit of a deep dive into some prospects.
And finally, this is overdue, let's be honest. We keep talking about it, and then we're just putting it off.
I know.
Things come up. We've been busy.
We keep having ideas.
We need to do like the olden days and we start recording a second episode, which we've done that the past 2 days, past 2 weeks.
We have.
We'll get there eventually.
We will. Once the season kicks in full swing, it's 2 episodes every single week. Right now, it's kind of like that little weird middle where it's 1 episode every week for sure, sometimes 2.
Yeah. It'll be interesting during the season. Got a little baby expected in August.
We do. Yeah. We'll see how this goes,
We've got plans. Don't worry. There are things in motion. I think our listening audience will enjoy.
I think they will. Yeah. Yeah. I will probably need to hop on the sidelines for a little bit as little baby Jay comes along, but we have plans in store.
Why would you be sidelined?
I
think people overestimate how much attention kids actually need. There's a reason we invented baby gates. Put them in a padded room. Just close the door.
Oh, man, my wife will kill you.
You can tell I'm married with kids.
No
tolerance for children whatsoever.
Bet it's like guys that just
imagine
have
my
dogs.
coworkers' kids are sick. Like, I got to take care of my kid. Like, oh my God. Like, now I've got to pull double duty because your stupid kid's sick? Fire them. Get them out. Give me some reliable single person in here who can get the job done.
Oh, boy.
I would be a ruthless leader.
You would. We have talked about this. It's been like one of those underlying themes of the show, just like what type of leader Ben would be if you were given unlimited power, the levels at which you would go to extend and show off this power that you had acquired.
See, now it wouldn't be power just for showing off for power's sake. There is an ultimate goal. I would be making the world a better place, but the world, it would not appreciate it at first. There would revolutions would have to be quelled. Rebellions would have to be squashed. When you can tell I pull a little bit for the Empire when I watch Star Wars. Like, that's the kind of leader I would be.
You're like, but guys, Darth Vader's just misunderstood.
He's look, the man lost everything, and now he's trying to bring order.
This is a fantasy football show. You wouldn't be able to tell. Oh, man. Yes, we are talking wide receivers on this edition of the show. And what do we do? Like 6, 7 of them? The top?
Yeah, we'll probably talk the most about the top 6 or 7. I put more names in here because it's just a deep class this year. It is super deep. There's a lot of really good guys. We tiered this up. Probably won't surprise many people who are in what tiers, but the last tier 4, like there's like so many good guys, and I think there's guys who could jump into higher tiers. That's how, like, I guess talented they are, but that's also how good the guys ahead of them are. That they're in sort of tiers of their own. If
Right.
that makes sense. That was maybe not the best way to say that, but you can know where I'm going with it.
No, I mean, it makes sense. Like this year's wide receiver class is deep. It's very top heavy. As we all know, there's a couple guys at the top that everybody is drooling over for very good reasons. But beyond those couple guys, there are several players that aren't necessarily as can't miss as your Marvin Harrisons, your Malik Neighbors, and you could throw in Rome Odunze in there. But, maybe they don't have that same ceiling, but they could certainly slot in as really, really valuable fantasy pieces if a couple things break right. You've got potential X receivers in this class that you didn't have last year, especially. Like there just weren't any guys above 6 feet tall in last year's draft class. This year, there's a bunch of them. So there's a lot to be excited
there's
about.
a lot of wide receiver 2s in last year's class.
Yeah.
And the one wide receiver 1, we did not think anything about him.
Yeah. I mean, you got Tank Dell came out of that class. He, I guess, turned into a wide receiver 1.
We'll see. He's like 150 pounds.
I know. Puka Nacua, obviously.
If your weight, if I could rep you on the bench, that's what you weigh. That's not good.
Yeah, that's not ideal. That's not ideal. But we do have a couple of the Tank Dell body style in this year's draft as well. So it'll be interesting to see if the trend of little guys being studs continues. Like Jordan Addison, not very big. Devonta Smith, not very big. Obviously, Tank Dell. I think there's definitely a trend though where you've got positions within the position at wide receiver, but it's turning into the height, weight, speed freaks are not the only way to win in the NFL, which we've known. It's sort of morphed and changed what actually works at the NFL level over the past few years.
Yeah, the truly dominant receivers, they're not big anymore. I mean, not that these guys are small, but like Justin Jefferson he's 6'1". Jamar Chase is 6 feet tall. You've got Cooper Kupp is like 6'1". And this type of player, the guy who can do it all, essentially. Like you can put Jamar Chase outside, you can put him in the slot, whatever he has to do, he can do it. That's what the NFL wants these days. And obviously he's got, he runs the 4.3 and the 40-inch vert and just athletic freak.
Yeah. A housekeeping item real quick before we hop in and dive into these receivers. If you're listening to, what are we recording this on Wednesday, the 27th? You're listening to this. You'll be listening on Thursday. We just released our first newsletter today when we're recording, but yesterday when you're listening. There's going to be a link to subscribe to the newsletter if that's something you're into, where it's coming in every week, Wednesday morning, usually a data deep dive or an interesting stat or something data related, numbers related that you can take and use in your fantasy football leagues. It's going to be a quick read.
Stuff.
Thinky brain stuff. There we go. Things that hopefully we can quantify and say, all right, this is something that we're noticing, and there will be some sort of actionable element in there that you can take and use as you see fit. So if that sounds like that is something you want to get in your inbox every single week, check the link down in the description. Wherever you're listening to this show, there's going to be a link you can click on. You can go subscribe to the newsletter. Also, follow us wherever you're listening. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button there as well. But follow us wherever you're listening to the podcast. It helps us out so much. Alrighty. Receivers. You want to lead us off with the number one guy, the heir apparent.
Yeah, let's go. It's tier 1 as a whole. There's 2 guys here. I don't think anyone is going to argue or disagree or give me much pushback when I say Marvin Harrison Jr. is the wide receiver 1 in this class. He's been the wide receiver 1 in this class since, I believe, 2021 when his freshman year was. So we know who he is. He had a 38% dominator rating. He had 3.44 yards per route run, broke out at 19, dominated at Ohio State, where Ohio State has just produced. Josh, you okay?
I'm I am
Josh
dying.
has sneezed his brain out for 2 straight times. I ignored the first one, but I wanted to bring attention to the second one. Get your life straight. But back to Marvin Harrison Jr., who has dominated with elite target competition. Emeka Egbuka will be a first-round receiver next year. What else is there to say when you saw him do it with JSN? You saw him do it. I mean, I think he was a little bit the odd man out his true freshman year. But again, you can't really fault him for that because Garrett Wilson was there. Chris Olave was there. Just dominant NFL receivers at Ohio State, and he still stands out as the best one by far is him. So I do wonder somewhat he's not participating in the drills. He didn't do combine, he didn't do pro day, but I feel like it's more of the guy knows his tape stands out from the rest. He knows he's that good.
He has nothing to prove. He's like, if you don't think I'm good based on what I've put on tape, that's a you problem. That is not a me problem. He's like, I can run.
Yeah.
But what is that going to change about how I play? Like,
yeah,
nothing.
I wonder some if like he knew he's not going to run like the a mid 4.4 or 4.3 40 like some of these guys like Malik Neighbors and guys are going to do. But I don't think we really expect him to do that anyway. Like, that's not his game. He can do it. Like, I've seen Marvin Harrison, and I guess look at the tape. I've seen Marvin Harrison blow the top off a defense. He's that kind of receiver. He can literally do anything. Elite route running, elite hands, elite athletic profile, elite heritage. His father's a Hall of Famer. Like, there is not a single box that Marvin Harrison Jr. does not check. If he doesn't run a 4.3 40, I don't care. So, and he's going to go, I guess is weird. Like, you don't see the opportunity that he's going to get many times. I mean, you saw like maybe Jamar Chase when he went to the Bengals, like outstanding landing spot. You're going to go get to play with, a top 5 quarterback. And Marvin Harrison Jr. has a chance for that to happen himself, I guess. Kyler Murray may not be a top 5 quarterback, but he's going to be a top 10 if he goes to the Cardinals. What if he goes to the Chargers? I mean, at that 5, both of these teams in top 5 with good established quarterbacks needing a receiver doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, I mean, there's many possibilities where this could end up being awesome for him. Obviously, the Chargers is one. The Cardinals, I've heard that the Cardinals will trade out of the number 4 slot.
I've also heard the Chargers will trade out. I mean, there's so much talk right now going on.
Yeah. I could see both of those teams trading back. So, I mean, then you're looking at, okay, do the Giants then take Marvin Harrison? Does he slip even further? I've also heard some buzz that some teams prefer Malik Neighbors. And so is Marvin Harrison even the first receiver off the board? I don't know. Like, I've seen a couple of scenarios where he makes it back to Chicago at 9. That seems really far-fetched, but it's theoretically possible.
He ain't falling to 9, guys. I'm sorry.
Maybe I'm
an idiot and will eat these words, but I don't see it happening.
I would be surprised, but weirder things have happened. I remember Will Levis was the odds-on favorite to be picked at number 2 last year, and he was a second rounder. So,
yeah, and and it goes to show too, what I know about fantasy because, when Puka Nacua had, done like 3 straight dominant weeks, I said sell him for JSN because the owner might be low on him. That was a boo-boo.
I remember that one.
I can admit my mistakes though. See, we can move on.
Marvin's amazing. I think we all realize and understand that Marvin's amazing. He obviously, like, he profiles as that outside dominant X receiver, the kind of guy that you just hope he goes to a place where he gets fed a bunch of targets because he's going to be amazing no matter what. I did see there's a guy, Matt Harmon, on, I don't know who he works for. He might be by himself doing his own thing, but he has this thing called reception perception. He's kind of your favorite fantasy creator's favorite creator, where he just He's kind of become the go-to guy for wide receiver stuff. And he charts every receiver, all their routes, and releases all this information. I think he just released it like this past week. And in one of the write-ups he did for Marvin Harrison, he said that Marvin Harrison got double teamed on like 16, 17% of his routes run this past season at Ohio State. And he still produced to such a crazy extent. Yeah. Like, it was far above every other receiver that Harmon had charted. So, you know, there's still that part of it too, where it's like, I think he's going to be extremely successful no matter what.
Yep. Absolutely agree. Don't necessarily got to spend too much more time on Harrison.
Malik Nabers. I think he has entered the Marvin Harrison territory as a can't miss, locked in fantasy stud.
Oh, absolutely.
I think you've watched him. Like, I've gone back and watched a lot of Nabers' film, but I think you were in on him just because you watched the SEC a lot more than I did. What does Nabers do that makes him so special?
Nabers, and it's not that Marvin Harrison doesn't do these things, but the things he does there's things he does that I think put him almost on equal footing with Marvin Harrison. I know people want to say he's the generational prospect, and he is, but Malik Nabers, I mean, the dude is Ja'Marr Chase to me, from everything that I've seen. Because Marvin, you see him, he has to be double teamed at all time. He's good at beating double coverages. He does deep, does all these things. But Malik is honestly potentially more athletic than Marvin Harrison is. His what he can do after the catch and with his explosiveness is on a different level, I think. He ran a 4.35 at his pro day, which was today, 40-inch vert. You and I expected it. Some people didn't. They were surprised by it. I'm like, if you turn on this guy's tape,
dude, I love it.
Constantly,
every single time, people. Every single time these dudes put on underwear and run against air, everybody's like, "Oh, they're so athletic," and it's like, yeah.
I mean, obviously,
we know.
Like we said, I've been watching Malik Nabers a lot, and I've watched his film a lot. I've seen this man torching SEC defenses year in and year out. So his athleticism, his ability to create after the catch, his catching ability too. Like, he's not a body catcher. I mean, this dude can catch with his hands. If you put the number 1 on his jersey, like, you would think that is Ja'Marr Chase out there playing again for LSU. He broke out.
Yeah, they look very similar.
As a true sophomore. He is currently 20 years old. Like, he is the youngest receiver in the class. So, outstanding breakout age. He's the highest graded receiver by PFF in the class. He's dominated with elite target competition. Like Brian Thomas Jr., spoiler alert, he's our wide receiver 4 in this class. And I don't think anyone was arguing that Malik Nabers is clearly better than him. He's been better than him. And, to do that with a receiver that's producing 1,000 yards and 20 touchdowns in college, 3.64 yards per route run. I mean, Marvin Harrison, a blue chip, but Malik Nabers checks every single box that Marvin Harrison checks, and checks some of them even better than Harrison does.
Yeah, I think they play the position a little bit differently. Obviously, Nabers is really great after the catch. Yeah. Harrison is just more of a traditional outside X receiver, like a Julio Jones kind of player. That's more what he is. More of like an AJ Green, Julio Jones, which is not like a knock or a plus. It's just different. Nabers is more of like an Antonio Brown type of player, a great after the catch, really shifty in the open field. But also a really, really polished route runner. as well. A really great hands catcher in jump ball situations. So like they're just different. I don't think that there's really one better than the other one, to be honest with you. I think that they're very, very similar. And like the value difference between the two of them probably will come down to what offense they land in when they get drafted.
Yeah. And to your point there, who they land to will be important, but say the dream, I guess, landing spot, or what, if nobody trades back, anything like that happens, Harrison goes to Arizona, Neighbors goes to the Chargers. It truly will not shock me if Neighbors produces more. And it's not so that, Justin Herbert is that good, because Justin Herbert is. If you listen to our podcast, we love Herbert. But the style of football he plays has the potential, not saying it will, but it can be more higher producing for fantasy than the traditional, ex Julio Jones style that Harrison plays. So I won't be shocked if Neighbors ends up outscoring Harrison.
I wouldn't be shocked either, just for touchdowns, because Neighbors is the type of player that generally, and this is, we are grasping at straws here trying to find a difference. But generally speaking, Malik Neighbors, that type of player scores more touchdowns. He scored more touchdowns in college. And that type of player tends to score more touchdowns at the NFL level. But, like Julio Jones was the best receiver in football for forever, and he was getting 6, 7, 8 touchdowns a season.
Yeah.
Whereas Antonio Brown had his run and he was 12, 13, 15 touchdowns a season.
Which is where
just different.
I feel the Jamar Chase comp is reasonable, not just because, they played at LSU, but I'm like, look at their athleticism, first of all. Both of them are 6 foot, 200 pounds, run a 4.35, and then the style of play is almost the same. You look at Jamar Chase's NFL numbers. I think this year was the first time he didn't hit 10 touchdowns, and that's only because Burrow was hurt. He got hurt. That, they give him the ball in space and say, do something. Versus Justin Jefferson, I think most people would say he's a better receiver than Jamar Chase, but Chase scores more because of that style. Right. And that's exactly how Malik Neighbors plays.
Exactly. Yeah. So we are very excited about Malik Neighbors. I think maybe it's today, maybe it's because the pro day was today. Everybody was like, oh my gosh, he is super fast, super athletic.
I've been on Neighbors before this.
Yeah, I remember you telling me a year ago, Malik Neighbors is the truth. And I watched a little bit. I remember he took a slant. I can't remember who they were playing, but I was watching Kayshon Boutte when we were scouting him. And Malik Neighbors was just clearly better than Kayshon Boutte. And
Kayshon,
and it was like
Malik Neighbors is what we hoped that Kayshon Boutte would be, and he's not close to it.
Yes. It was just so funny because I was there watching Boutte, and then it's like, who's this other guy? Screw Boutte. I don't care about him.
That was Neighbors. True sophomore season. Joker's 19 years old, dominating SEC defenses.
Yeah. He was a freak.
We talk about, Jamar Chase is one of the best prospects of the past decade, possibly the best. And some people are saying Marvin Harrison Jr. is as good, if not better. I'm like, if he's as good as not better, then so is Malik Neighbors in my mind. And this is not knocking Marvin Harrison Jr. This is giving props to what Malik Neighbors is.
Right. Let's move over to Rome Odunze. We're dropping a tier.
Some people would have him either in the tier with these other two guys, or they would have him side by side with Neighbors.
Yeah, I think there's a slight dip, and it's not necessarily to say that Odunze is not super talented or that he's not going to be great at the next level. But I do think that Rome Odunze, at least in college, had a bit of a superpower that I don't think any of the other guys had. And just hear me out, because when I say this, you're going to be like, that doesn't make any sense. Just hear me out. Michael Penix, I think, elevated his wide receivers more than the other quarterbacks. You know, Jayden Daniels was awesome, had an amazing season, won the Heisman. But I think Penix, with his ability to throw on time and on target and throw with leverage down the field, made his receiver's job that much easier. So obviously you've got Rome Odunze, you've got Jalen McMillan, you've got
like
Jalen
what
Hyatt.
Tua does with Tyreek and Waddle. Not that we knew Tyreek was obviously incredible, but like he's been better since he's being with Miami just because of that style of QB. Now, I don't think Tua's an amazing quarterback, but like you were just saying with Penix, I don't think Penix is a great quarterback.
Yes, but Penix throws a significantly better deep ball than Tua does. At least he throws it better outside the hashes with accuracy. To the point where it's like jump ball situations for Rome Odunze. Obviously, he is. That's the thing people say about him. He's a jump ball freak, and he is. But also, I think that there is an element here where Michael Penix threw passes that were maybe a little bit easier to catch for his receivers than even what Jayden Daniels threw to his receivers, or even what Quinn Ewers, or, you know, fill in the blank, obviously Kyle McCord. He put his receivers in a position to win, and Rome Odunze especially capitalized on those situations. And so here he is, a 1,500-yard season later. That is not necessarily a knock. I think it's just something you got to take into account when you're looking back at Rome Odunze. I do think Michael Penix factors in there where it's like, okay, yes, Odunze's great, but also he did benefit from a quarterback that helped maximize everything around him.
That's fair. I will give you that. And I mean, I do feel like that's sort of reflected here some, is he is a tier below the top two guys. There's a reason for that. He's a little bit, I think he's still 21, but I want to say he stayed 4 years.
He did.
At Washington. So still broke out. I think as a junior, I think is when he broke out. That's when he had his first 1,000-yard season. And then last year, obviously the huge monster year. If you watch him though, I mean, as good as Michael Penix was in that offense, like, Rome he's still a dog. Like he's got a little bit of Devontae in him. As blasphemous as that sound, like he's got some Devontae Adams in him.
Yep.
4.47, 40-inch vert. I mean, all around great athletic stats. I'm not too worried about Rome Odunze. Like, and maybe there's a chance come draft day he's higher up on my board. Like, I mean, some people want to predict he goes higher than Malik Nabers, and if he gets an amazing landing spot and Nabers, God forbid, ends up with the Jets or the Bears, like some people think he could. Not that either of those spots would be bad, but if he's with the Jets or Bears, and then Odunze is on the Chargers, or the Cardinals trade back and get him somehow, something like that, I guess I can see the argument. But just the prospect of, how young and how early Nabers broke out, and obviously we know about Harrison, there's a reason he's a step behind in our rankings just as a player behind the other two. Now, draft capital and all that will dictate other things.
Yeah, and I mean, he still had 1,100 yards in 2022, so it's not like he's a one-year wonder. He's definitely been producing for a long time. I do think there's context to why he's a 4-year player, though. He came in, and there was the COVID year, which affected everything, obviously. And so
you got to give him a pass on that.
Yeah, he's a 3-year player. I have seen some people knock him being a 4-year player because, it is a fair criticism. Generally speaking, guys that stay in school longer, that are 4-year and 5-year players, when they produce later in their career, when they don't break out until their 3rd year, 4th year in college, it is a little bit of a red flag, generally speaking. But I think with Rome Odunze, there needs to be some additional context there. And I think that's spread throughout this class.
He's not much older than Harrison, I think, but a few months.
Yeah, he's 21 years old. It's not like he's 24, 25 years old. I mean, we'll talk about Xavier Legette later. He's 24 years old. So
Xavier Legette's about as old as
it's a little bit different. He dang near is. Dude is 2 steps away from having a family and a house and a mortgage. So yeah. he's almost there. But yeah, any thoughts on Odunze before we move on? I think you mentioned Davante Adams as a comp. I don't think that's crazy. I definitely have thought.
I'm not saying he's going to be Davante, but the style of play and his ability to track the ball is similar.
Yes. It's so funny because his calling card is his contested catch ability, but I think that sort of sells him short. When you watch him play, it's not just that he goes and mosses people. Yes, he does that. And that I think is a nice trait to have. He's so smooth, dude. I think he is overlooked as a route runner a little bit.
Yeah. Absolutely. I guess that's sort of where I had the Davante comp for him, was not just the style of plays, because he ran a 4.47, which is good, but the speed doesn't necessarily flash, that way. But he just knows how to manipulate people with his route running and just create that little bit of separation, be it at the line of scrimmage or down the field at the top end of the route, like Davante can, to where, I mean, you were kind of with him the whole time, and all of a sudden there's a little bit of separation there out of nowhere.
Yeah, no, he can sort of flip his hips and manipulate his body a little bit in a way that's just, it's very skillful, the way that he can move his body through space. And yeah, so he's a slight tier down from the top 2 guys, but that's not to say he's not a perennial top 12 fantasy receiver in the making. Like, dude is...
No, I'm very excited for Rome Odunze.
I am not sure that he would not have been the wide receiver 1 in last year's class. Like, if you had what we know about him today, if he came out last year, if you just like bumped everything back a year and he had his 2023 season in 2022, came out last year, and we were judging him against Jackson Smith-Njigba, against Jordan Addison, I think it's very possible that Rome Odunze would have been the wide receiver 1 of last year's class.
I think there's a chance we might have put JSN over him, just because people want to talk bad about JSN last year, but like, when the dude had 1,600 yards as a true sophomore at Ohio State with Garrett Wilson then playing, like, there's a reason we had him that high. But yeah. I agree, Rome probably would have been even with him in worst case scenario. You're flipping a coin between the two.
Yeah. Wide receiver 4, we have another tier break. So also, in case you haven't been keeping up, tier 1, Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors. Tier 2, Rome Odunze by himself. Tier 3, it's another player by himself. It is Brian Thomas Jr.
BTJ good, dude.
That LSU offense was crushing people.
LSU likes these wide receiver tandems. You got Odell and Jarvis, then Jamar and Justin, and now you got Malik and Brian Thomas. It's impressive.
Man, Malik Neighbors stole the show a little bit last year, but Brian Thomas sneakily, I don't know how sneakily it was actually, I don't know, but he had like 18 touchdowns and 1,100 yards or something.
1,100 yards,
amazing
and 17
year.
Touchdowns.
There you go. He had a great year.
And you know I like Jaden Daniels if you listen to it, but it's very helpful for Jaden Daniels when you got Malik doing his thing, closer to the line and in the middle, and then Brian Thomas's huge self way down the field, and the Joker runs a 4.35. So he's down the field and he's 10 yards behind his defender because he's so fast.
Yeah. It's crazy. There are 3 receivers this year that profile as huge outside X receivers that also happen to run a 4.3. So Brian Thomas produced the best and the youngest of those 3. The 3 being Brian Thomas, Adonai Mitchell, and Xavier Legette. All 3 of them are enormous human beings that happen to run a 4.3. But for whatever reason, not for whatever reason, Brian Thomas, because of what he did this past season, he is the highest ranked of them. What does he bring that maybe the other guys don't? Or what did he flash on tape that has kind of made him separate himself?
I guess there's the reason I have him up here is he did have over 1,000 yards and 17 touchdowns, while at the same time dealing with Malik Nabers, who's a target hog and an elite prospect, or one of the elite prospects in his own right. So he did that. There's a few more concerns with him. I guess is the reason why we have him in, below Adunza, is he's 6'3". Yes, he's 200 pounds. Yes, he runs a 4.3. Got the 40-inch vert. But he did operate a lot down the field versus, doing the screens, intermediate routes. Not that he can't do all that, but his biggest thing is he's a deep threat. And he's also likely going middle of the first round to late. So he can have a really good landing spot with his quarterback as well.
Yeah, I actually haven't seen where he's getting mocked mostly. Like I see him in the teens, right?
Yeah, I see sometimes he gets mocked to the Saints, which would be annoying for Chris Olave owners. I see him get mocked to Cincinnati, assuming they trade T. Higgins. I see him get mocked to the Bills. They just lost Gabe Davis. I see them trading up, or he falls to them. Make Gabe Davis an athletic freak with super speed, and you got Brian Thomas. Brian Thomas is a much better Gabe Davis. Like, if he goes there, whoo, that's frightening.
Yeah, if you took Gabe Davis and he had kind of capitalized on his potential in college, you would have Brian Thomas. I think all three of the height, weight, speed freaks, him, Adonai Mitchell, and Legette, at different points have been compared to DK Metcalf. I think Mitchell that's not a great comparison for Mitchell, but for Thomas and Legette especially, they get the DK comparisons, maybe even AJ Brown comparisons. They get that thrown around a lot. Is that a good comparison for Brian Thomas or no?
That's pretty good. He's a little bit more slight than DK. He might have a little bit better of a route tree than DK does. So, I guess in that case scenario, you're excited. Like he's got more potential upside than DK. DK hasn't been a top 20 fantasy receiver in 3 years.
Yeah, but I think we would also all agree if DK were in a situation where you've got a Josh Allen throwing you the ball, or I don't know, one of these situations that Brian Thomas could end up being in, DK would be a very, very scary fantasy producer.
That's true. That's very true.
So
we'll see if he ends up being a one somewhere. I don't necessarily think that happens. But no matter where he goes, he's going to have a good spot, and he's going to be a huge, we've seen him in college produce with a true number one on the other side. So
yeah,
just the wild athletic ability. He broke out a little bit later as a junior, but he's still, coming out of college after 3 years versus staying that senior year.
Yeah. Let's jump down a tier. So Brian Thomas was by himself in tier 3. There is a break for us between him and our next receiver, Adonai Mitchell.
This is a big tier.
Yeah, this next tier is everybody left. So we've got a big old clump of dudes where it's like, I don't know how big a difference we've got between these players. Adonai Mitchell's a really interesting scout. In fact, we just put out a post today, I think it was, where I don't know how you feel about him, but I'm incredibly conflicted. I think when I watch him play, there are moments where he's just so obviously incredibly talented. He makes just highlight catches. But at the same time, he takes plays off occasionally. He's not a confident catcher, so he catches with his body more than you would like. And then there's also the added element of Quinn Ewers is throwing him the ball. And Quinn Ewers is such an experience because Quinn Ewers at times uncorks beautiful, beautiful throws. And then at other times, he looks like a complete bum. And there's videos, many, many minutes long of him overthrowing Xavier Worthy, overthrowing Adonai Mitchell.
It's hard to overthrow Xavier Worthy.
I know.
That's impressive.
He's the fastest human to ever enter the NFL, and Quinn Ewers is throwing dirt balls over his head. So there's many layers to it. A lot of people, casuals, chalk up a lot of Adonai Mitchell's lack of success at times to Quinn Ewers. I think that's a pretty lazy take, to be honest with you. Yes, Quinn Ewers at times looked a little rough, but
yeah, but he's a good college quarterback now.
Right. Like, he's not a bum. Like, he's going to be one of the quarterbacks drafted next year unless he falls flat on his face this year. But that still doesn't discount the fact that Adonai Mitchell, like, at times just disappears, flat out disappears, doesn't always catch with his hands, is not super confident. And on top of that, analytically, no, he did not.
I mean, you talk about all these, freak skills that he has, and he does. You would think you have 1,000 yards in college.
You would think. His best season was this past year. I think he had like 840 yards.
Yeah. I mean, the range of
now,
outcomes
granted, he
is wild with A.D. Mitchell, I think.
It is. Yeah. I think that's where I landed. He could be T. Higgins. I think that's like my high-end comp for A.D. Mitchell. I see it. Like the way he moves, the way he runs routes. If he were a better contested catch situation player, I think T. Higgins would be a very great comparison for him. But like, he's not always that. Yeah, no, I absolutely get some Quentin Johnston vibes with Adonai Mitchell, where it's like, I don't know, a couple red flags here and there. I don't know if it'll be that bad of I don't know if it'll turn out that way, but I definitely have thought to myself, this feels like Quentin Johnston a little bit.
Yeah, I think he's more physically gifted than Johnston, but at the same time, we're like, all the pieces were there for you to be better. Why weren't you?
Yeah. And I don't know if it's that he was competing with Xavier Worthy. I don't know if it was just, and see, even then, it's like
that's why he's down in this tier. I'm like, Brian Thomas Jr. was competing with someone far better than Xavier Worthy, and he still produced.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, the Texas offense, like, that is an offense where you're trotting out better players than your opponent just about every weekend. Like, there's a couple times, when you're playing Alabama.
An offensive genius calling plays.
Right. I mean, yeah, when you're playing Washington, okay, they got good players. When you're playing Alabama, yeah, they got good players. But like, outside of that, maybe the Oklahoma game. Outside of that, y'all got better players than everybody you're playing. So like, I expected more, I think, from A.D. Mitchell, and at times, honestly, from Xavier Worthy.
Yeah, so he'll be super landing spot dependent to me. Like, if he goes to I don't know, let's say the Chiefs at 32.
It's intriguing.
It's gonna be hard for me not to be in on him because a guy with that athletic ability and the ability to do the things that he can do, that's pretty enticing. But
I'll be honest, I'm a little scared of that.
Like, yeah, I guess maybe the Chiefs, say the Bills.
Well, okay. I'm scared of a great landing spot for A.D. Mitchell because really? I'm not convinced. And if he goes to a great landing spot, I'm afraid that I will convince myself because of the landing spot. And if he's not all that, yeah, I'll get too excited about the landing spot and I'll just sort of disregard all the things that scare me about him. And I'll be like, you know what? Screw it. He's got Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or fill in the blank. And it will literally be a Quentin Johnston of last year where I wasn't in on him until the Chargers drafted him. Then I was like, well, shoot, he's got Justin Herbert. He'll be fine.
That's a good point. That's a great point. And I mean, with some of the red flags you point out of like, sometimes doesn't necessarily catch with his hands or isn't confident catching, like, okay, well, that's going to be dadgum MVS again for the Chiefs, wide open down the field and
right.
Drop it.
But
Andy Reid
says,
nope.
At the same time, dude shows flashes where it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much potential here. There's so much meat on the bone.
He should be better than he is. Why are you not better?
Yeah. Honestly, I asked myself that question quite a bit. Why are you not better? I don't know.
For
Xavier
you.
Worthy.
Not for these players, for you.
Yeah, just for me. I just look in the mirror.
Look in the mirror. Why are you not better? Be better.
Xavier Worthy, the other side of the offense for Texas, he produced a bit more consistently than Mitchell did. He broke out as a freshman. I don't know if you remember this or not, but he had dang near 1,000 yards and double-digit touchdowns as a 18-year-old. He did not really top that season, but he was good the 2 years after that.
Bijan back then too.
They did have Bijan.
You had to worry about Bijan then.
Yeah, and then they added Mitchell this past season. So I think there's things you can point to. I do think of the two receivers, Xavier Worthy was Texas's number one.
And he did look better too. Like he looked like a more complete player. Like AD, I don't think there was a question, at least before the combine, that Xavier Worthy was the better receiver. And then AD Mitchell did what he did and was so impressive, at the combine. That's when he started shooting up people's boards.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I forget he ran like a 4.33 or something. Like,
yeah, he was crazy fast.
Crazy fast. And then Worthy goes, "Oh, I can do you one better. I'm gonna do a 4.21 or whatever."
There's a reason I'm better than this guy.
Right. So Worthy's interesting. He has that outlier body type, the Jordan Addison, the Tank Dell, the Devonta Smith, where a few years ago people would have been scared off him. They're all doing quite well. They've made themselves a lot of money in the NFL. I don't think I'm worried about Xavier Worthy's body type or anything like that. I think that ship has sort of sailed. At the same time, there's still kind of a little small, tiny voice in the back of my head that's like, but he is 160 pounds. Just remember, he is a diminutive human being.
He's going to be landing spot dependent too, because like if he can't go to a team that's just going to use him like Henry Ruggs and just be a deep threat, that worries me. That's out possible for Xavier Worthy. I think he's better than that, but will NFL teams do that? Is the question.
It would be a travesty if an NFL team saw Xavier Worthy and just said you're a deep threat. That would be
our buddy
so
Landon
sad.
Davis. Now it was joking. Well, he texted me the as soon as that 40 time happened, he's like, "Well, I'm officially out on Xavier Worthy." Just a deep threat.
Yeah, I mean he's got a production profile that's significantly better than all those speedsters that people bring up. John Ross gets brought up, but Xavier Worthy is a significantly better football player than John Ross was coming out. And I think when John Ross was drafted, that 40 time was a bit more of a novelty, and people were just in on dudes that were really fast. It didn't necessarily make them good football players, but the NFL was in on them. I think Xavier Worthy is a legitimately good football player.
Yeah.
Obviously, his success will come down to landing spot.
Yeah, we'll see.
Troy Franklin. Have you any convictions about Sir Troy Franklin?
I do not. I do not. He is the one in here. Like I don't want to be pushed either way. Like he produced, he ran a good 40 time. He didn't really test that great on other things. So like, is he like truly athletic, or was it? I don't know. He had a good yards per route run, 3.4. I mean, that's better than Brian Thomas. That's better than AD Mitchell. That's better than Rome Odunze. But Yeah, I don't have any convictions though with Troy Franklin.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. He is the sort of player that could get drafted to the Chiefs, drafted to the Bills, and then I'm like, shoot.
I can't not take him if he goes there.
Right. He looks incredibly dynamic on film. And at the same time, I don't know exactly what it is, but there's just something with him that's like, I don't know. And I can't put my finger on it. It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah,
like
it's really hard to explain.
Yeah, the other receivers in here, I think I can point to, or at least I can rationalize why they weren't slightly better than what they ended up being. With Troy Franklin, I mean, he had 1,300 yards. But there's still something about it that's like, I just don't know. And it is a very odd feeling with him.
Yeah. I'm looking at our next guy, who's Xavier Legette on the list. And I know there's a little bit of Carolina bias, but if I'm comparing him and Troy Franklin, like, that's hard for me. Like, there's something about Troy Franklin. I can't figure out what it is. Like, Xavier Legette, I think, looks better than him. I don't
Xavier
know what it
Legette,
is.
Talk about somebody that will just woo you in with measurables and highlights. And
we knew this, though.
We knew something about
we knew he was going to be a height, weight, speed freak.
Yeah, but there's just something about a 230-pound human that can take a slant and go 80 yards with it. It's just a very alluring skill to have. And Xavier Legette has that in spades.
Mm-hmm. Those things are very enticing. But even as the Carolina fan, I'll push back some. Like, there is a huge red flag on his profile.
Oh,
he didn't do this until last year as a fifth-year senior with no target competition. Now, this is not to take anything away from it. Dude balled in a bad offense, and then put up outstanding combine numbers.
Yes. I am curious, though. I know a lot of people have talked about it. Since you are a South Carolina fan, you're dialed in here. What in the world happened to where he just didn't get on the field at all for 4 years?
That's the thing. We don't know. And like, okay.
Well, like, was he bad and then all of a sudden was good?
His first 2 years, I think he was, I can't remember exactly, but he was pretty highly touted coming out of high school. We got him. I think he redshirted his freshman year. So year 2 gets out there. And like the few times he's on the field, like he's just dropping balls. Like he was not a very good receiver. He was not polished, nothing. He was just big and he couldn't catch anything. So that kind of became it really did. That became the narrative with him. So we didn't really care about him. But he stuck with it. And then, we had Antoine Juice Wells, who he'll be an interesting prospect coming out next year. But we had him. He was really, really good last season. But that was sort of when Legette was becoming on the radar. It was like, Juice Wells was obviously our number one guy. And then Legette was like, oh, he wasn't that bad. He wasn't as bad as he used to be. And then this past year, he just took over. So yeah, I'm not out on Xavier Legette. I know he's just, I guess a little bit like A.D. Mitchell. There is such a wide range of outcomes. Like, he could be a Gabe Davis, where he's a good for the NFL team, where he's stretching the field and doing nothing for your fantasy team. But there's that part in my head too, kind of like you said, somebody that big, that fast, with those ability. Like, if he gets the opportunity to be a 1, he could do it.
Here's the thing, though. If you just didn't have the 4-year black hole at the beginning of his career, if you just had, like, this was his 3rd season and you had 2 years of, he went out and he was doing his best, but it was like a 400, 500 yard type of guy. If you had 2 years of that and then his 1,200 yard explosion, that's one thing. But man, the season he just had.
And like he pops honestly, on film too. Like when you watched him.
Dude, there's no red flags on his 2023 game film. You watch him play just in 2023 and you're like, he's incredible. He's amazing.
Like, who is this guy? Where did he come from? Like, he's been at South Carolina for 5 years.
Yeah, no, I remember just finding out for the first time that like he literally had less than 200 yards for 4 years in a row, and then had 1,200 yards in the SEC. Wild. It just doesn't ever happen. But it not only that, like you watch him play and he's polished. He runs clean routes. He's great in contested catch situations. He catches with his hands. He's confident. He's so freaking fast. I mean, he's outrunning corners at making them look slow.
There was like a stretch slow. Like throughout this season this year where I swear he had a 70-yard touchdown like 4 games in a row. I don't think that actually happened, but it was like, you know, our offense is sitting here just with nothing, decimated. We're horrible. And then you see Rattler just heave one down the field. You're like, look at it! There he is! And he's just mossing some Georgia defender out there.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I think if you could delete the black hole, he would be even with Brian Thomas for me. The problem is there is that black hole. It's like, I don't know what that's about. And he is old. He is 23. So he's coming in as an elder statesman. But like the DK Metcalf comparison, call back to earlier, dude, he looks exactly like what DK Metcalf looked like coming out. Looks exactly like him. I know.
And he fast.
Brian Thomas, it doesn't quite fit. You have to stretch it a little bit. I mean, but like Xavier Legette
Legette's heavy set like DK.
Yes. They look the same. They play the same. Very, very similar. I don't know if it'll translate to the NFL the way that DK is translated, but he's enticing.
I think we just talked ourselves into Xavier Legette over Troy Franklin. Troy Franklin's just not enticing, whereas Xavier Legette's got that like, ooh, but what if?
I know. It's going to be landing spot dependent. Like if Xavier Legette, if he goes to a situation where either he just doesn't get a crack at it early on or gets paired up with a terrible quarterback, like I see him mocked to the Panthers a lot, and I actually don't hate it because he would fit in that offense. He would add an element to that offense that the offense desperately needs. I don't know if that means he'd be great for fantasy year one, but I feel like he would be incredibly important to the offense from the get-go, which is always a nice thing to have. Like if Troy Franklin goes to the Chiefs.
Looks pretty good.
Exactly. If Troy Franklin goes to the Chiefs, I don't know how he gets on the field initially. Like he's going to be a part-time player.
I mean, Rashee Rice and Hollywood Brown do everything you do.
Exactly. So, you know, it'll be landing spot dependent. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to hop into? We have done an hour already. So
yeah, I was honestly a little worried. I didn't think we'll probably move through these receivers pretty quick. No.
No. There's a lot of meat on the bone here.
This is just kind of I think in my mind at least, tier 1 is set with Harrison and Neighbors. Tier 2 is set with Odunze, and tier 3 is set with Brian Thomas Jr. At least in my head, those are pretty concrete, lock 'em in stone. That's where I've got these guys. Tier 4 can vary a ton. There's guys on this list that we didn't even talk about that, they could pop up. Ladd McConkey has picked up a ton of steam. I mean, the dude, he's Cooper Kupp if Cooper Kupp ran a 4.3, like based on what people are saying about him. He slid down our boards, but Keon Coleman's another name to keep an eye on. Like, there's so many good receivers in this draft. We got AD Mitchell at 5, but he could slide down. He could move up. Like, it's such a wide range of other guys, and they're all, even the ones that have questions, they're all good and have potential to hit at the NFL level.
Yeah, I legitimate. Like, how many guys did we talk about? We didn't mention Ladd McConkey. He could be very good. Yeah, Keon Coleman.
Ladd McConkey could end up at like end up there with Brian Thomas. Like if he gets a great landing spot.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, there's a bunch of guys that could end up being fantasy difference makers. The question is going to be, which ones is it? Because there's a lot of guys, and probably 50% of them will just fade into the distance in a couple of years. But there's going to be a couple of guys later
next
on.
Next offseason when we're kicking ourselves and like, why did I like him? Like, my gosh.
I know. But then there's going to be another one that like Ladd McConkey, where we're going to be like, golly, he's so good. How did we not see it?
How did we miss this?
It happens every year. I mean, we did not see Tank Dell coming. Let's put it that way.
I didn't see Puka coming. Nobody saw that coming.
No, nobody saw that one coming.
You got the dudes in the comments and like, how could you have missed on Puka? I'm like, bro, nobody hit on Puka. I'm like, all right, you got him off waivers, dude.
Yeah, you got him for free, my guy. Oh,
he was on your taxi squad.
He was. Oh, geez. All righty. Unless you got anything else, that'll do it for this one.
No, we'll be diving into more rookies next time.
Yeah, we're going to hop into rookies next week. We'll see you when we do it. Have a good week, everybody.